to you, Prof. I'm mindful of the fact that we have, a diverse range of audience here, and many people may not be very familiar with what ESG means. So very quickly, what exactly is ESG? Over to you, Prof.
Okay, good morning and thanks for inviting me to be here. I don't know, is it possible to share a few slides? I mean, that might also help the conversation, if you don't mind me asking.
Oh yes, of course. Can you try to share it on your end?
Okay, fine. I think, yes, it's there now, right? So I think I've got like a few minutes. So if you don't mind me, I may go into my lecturing mode, but I'll be very brief and make it as brief as possible so that we are all on the same page. So I want to reflect on ESG, right? Because when we talk about ESG these days, it tends to be esoteric to some people. But ESG simply means environmental, social, and governance considerations. And this would, of course, imply when you're making decisions. So ESG is a favorite word now, or acronym, that those in the financial services sector like capital markets and all. But if you look at the bottom of it, ESG is another way of talking about sustainability. And what is sustainability? Sustainability is basically balancing the impact we have on economy, society, and environment in our business decisions or anything we do. So, and there is a link between economy, society, and the environment. Without the environment, we don't have society. Without society, we don't have the economy. So the idea here is to ensure that there is a clear alignment amongst the three of them. So ESG in a nutshell is about managing our negative impacts, reducing our negative impacts on society and the environment. If you're a business, say for example, you're an oil and gas business, you're likely to have environmental impacts in terms of spillage or pollution, but also social impact in terms of your labor law, impact on your employees and so on and so forth. So that's basically what the ESG is all about. But there is also the element around shareholders, which is the economic dimension of it. Making sure that the three are balanced is what we want to achieve through ESG. And that's what some people have also called the triple bottom line. Originally, we only talk about the single bottom line of profit making. Have I made a profit or a loss? But now we are saying we need to go beyond that to think about the impact on environment, on society, as a way to demonstrate how we make money. So that is what it is in a nutshell, and I hope I've been able to explain that. But if you allow me, what I want to do, because when we talk about ESG these days, there are also, it's not a neutral space. It's filled with a lot of tensions and struggles. So because you might come across, what do we mean by this? So even the idea of environment and social is not settled. If you look at what is happening in the world today, it appears that ESG has been largely framed from the perspective of the environment and climate. I'm in Europe, and I keep pushing back on some of my colleagues here, and so and I try to remind them that sustainability is broader than just climate. Although climate is important, but if we are looking at some emerging economies, unemployment is still very high. In Africa in particular, unemployment is a massive problem. You also think about health or education. So these are issues. And when you talk about sustainability, again, there is that tension, which one should come first, environment or society? There is also the tension between profit and purpose. On one hand, we want to make money, but on the other hand, we want to do the right thing. So sustainability or ESG encourages us to do the right thing, but sometimes we are trapped. We are asking these questions. There is also the other tension, which is where in organizations, middle managers may understand it. Maybe if we are a lawyer, a company secretary, you understand it well, you go back to your organization, your top management may not understand it because they are driven by other interests. There is also the tension where you are looking at it in terms of region. I'm using Nigeria as an example. Many corporates in Lagos will focus on Lagos and then the rest of Nigeria. And I keep telling them Nigeria is broader than just Lagos, right? Especially when they're looking at their social footprint. The same also applies in terms of where you operate in the world, whether you're in the US, UK, or Nigeria. If you're a multinational firm, for example, how do you prioritize the different regions you work in. And also brings again that another tension, which I see that's the tension between the global and the local. So there are local trends, there are global trends. Which ones should we use in our sustainability agenda? ESG also highlights another tension, which is the tension between the now and the future. We talk about short-term and long-term. And in the ESG world, we tend to prioritize long-term. But how long is long-term? It's like asking how long is a piece of string. In some context, long-term is as long as 90 days. In some others, it's as long as 25 years. So that's idea of short-term and long-term is not well settled, and it tends to create a lot of tension. But there's also the tension in terms of, do we follow regulation or do we follow compliance? Because if you look at it in the context of Nigeria, you can ask yourself, what is driving ESG? Sometimes it might be as a result of regulation or even global pressures and so on and so forth. But there is also the idea that it needs to be voluntary. And that's where you lawyers, right? I'm saying you lawyers because you are the guys in corporate secretaries, right? So where you then ask, you only follow what is written in the law. Is that white or black? So anything beyond that. So this idea of voluntary compliance might also be in itself a problem. You can also see it whether it's as a risk or as an opportunity. In some instances, if you're working in some banks, they see it as a risk management. In others, they see it as an opportunity. So I just need to put all this context so you can appreciate that ESG is not a settled debate. It's still something evolving. And as we go through this, you may see some of these questions coming up and say, well, should we do this? Shouldn't we? Some tend to focus on negative impact. Some tend to focus on positive impact. Some tend to ask, is it holistic or partial? But just to wrap up, I know there's a lot happening here. The point here is that sustainability can be understood, or ESG, at two levels. One at the theoretical, or what I call mindset level. We know the impact we have in society. They can be positive or negative. We also know that they are right. I mean, it's right to address them. But sometimes we don't get to the level of practice. We know the right thing, but we don't do the right things. Why? Because there are pressures coming from the idea of profit or even competition. You don't want to be left alone. It can also be regulation or even the idea of globalization. So the point I'm trying to make here is that orientation is, thinking is not, understanding the concept is not enough, but we should do as much as possible to translate it into practice. So let me stop there in the interest of that. I hope I've been able to put it in context. I think the point I'm trying to make is that sustainability, or ESG, is about sustainability. Sustainability is about impact management, whether positive or negative. Ultimately, it has to be a mindset and a culture to help us translate it into practice.